Baudelaire's Sick Muse. If in Poe's Gothic imaginary, it is the corpse-like female subject as muse that enlivens the male artist's Gothic mirror. For Baudelaire, it is the strange and contradictory figure of the prostitute that commands his enthralled and appalled gaze. Baudelaire plays a vital, though seldom acknowledged, role in the development of European Gothic forms in the mid-19th century. Bram Dijkstra, for example, foregrounds the ways in which the seductively beautiful language and rabidly misogynist point of view of Baudelaire's writings influence both the image of the godlike male poet and male-authored representations of unruly and dangerous femininity through the second half of the 19th century. Exploiting Sade's aesthetics of evil, Baudelaire is also influenced by Poe's poetics of artificiality. He admires Poe's greenish or purplish backgrounds in which we can glimpse the phosphorescence of decay. And his work is also fascinated by the female body as a site of decomposition. As he famously writes in his intimate journals, "Woman is the opposite of the dandy, therefore she should inspire horror. Woman is natural, that is to say, abominable." Baudelaire reconfigures female sexuality as the dark abyss, as a dangerous but compulsive corporality representing the destructive drives of nature. Such images of dangerous female sexuality converge in Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal, a collection notable for its macabre treatment of dark desires, decay, and supernatural iconography. Quotations and translations from Les Fleurs du Mal are scattered through Carter's journals. These fragments in turn inform Carter's story Black Venus, which takes as its subject the figure of Jeanne Duval, Baudelaire's Creole mistress, prostitute, and the putative muse of the so-called Black Venus cycle of Les Fleurs du Mal. Through playful references to such poems as Les Bijoux, La Chevelure, Le Serpent qui Danse, Parfum Exotique, Le Chien, Je t'adore, à l'égal de la vue nocturne, and Sed non satia, Carter's story examines Baudelaire's grotesque transformation of the female muse as all except herself. Although Black Venus has received relatively little critical attention, a close reading of this text is vital to a reconsideration of the tensions characterizing Carter's positioning in relation to a European Gothic heritage and, in particular, her equivocation towards her French male literary influences and intertexts. In Black Venus, Carter's rewriting of the poetic-muse relation is contextualized in relation to the gendered construction of social and literary relations in mid-19th century French discourse and, in particular, the male artist's fascination with the prostitute as an emblematic figure of the modern urban landscape. Drawing on Walter Benjamin's concept of the phantasmagoria, Christina Britsolakis describes how the commodified environment of 19th century Paris becomes a spectral theater where commodities disport themselves as fetishes on display. The chief emblem and embodiment of this phantasmagoric landscape, which appears as allegory in the poetry of Baudelaire, is the prostitute. If the prostitute is its emblem, the alienated hero of this phantasmagoric landscape is the flaneur. In The Painter of Modern Life, Baudelaire describes the flaneur as the passionate spectator for whom it is an immense joy to set up house in the heart of the multitude amid the ebb and flow of movement, in the midst of the fugitive and the infinite. The spectator is the prince who everywhere rejoices in his incognito. The lover of life makes the whole world his family, just like the lover of the fair sex who builds up his family from all the beautiful women that he has ever found, or that are or are not to be found, or the lover of pictures who lives in a magical society of dreams painted on canvas. In the mid-19th century Gothic imaginary, the labyrinthine subterranean passages of the Gothic castle are exchanged for the dark and vertiginous maze of the modern city. The flaneur sets up house in the city. Perrault's prince, Sade's libertine, and Poe's poet-magician are in turn reincarnated in the figure of the perfect flaneur, who vampirically feeds off the sights and sounds of the cityscape, giving new vision to this Gothic space where the boundaries between reality and dream worlds dissolve. Nevertheless, while the transformation of modern space meant new possibilities of experience and desire for the mid-19th century flaneur, it is imagined as a realm to which women were denied subjective and artistic access. Not only is the activity of the flaneur in Baudelaire's Paris constructed as the preserve of the sovereign male subject, but it is also a mode of urban mobility from which women are excluded. For women, Griselda Pollock describes, the public spaces thus construed were where one risked losing one's virtue, dirtying oneself. Going out in public and the idea of disgraces were closely allied. Out on the streets, the prostitute was the public woman par excellence, at once alluring and repulsive for the avidly voyeuristic male flaneur and artist. She cast a particularly Gothic shadow. In Baudelaire's account, the prostitute's presence is a vital aspect of the kaleidoscopic contours of the modern cityscape at which the male flaneur directs his covetous gaze. Against a background of hellish light, or if you prefer, an aurora borealis, there arises the protean image of wanton beauty. Now she is majestic, now playful, now slender, even to the point of skinniness, now cyclopean, now tiny and sparkling, now heavy and monumental. She is a perfect image of the savagery that lurks in the midst of civilization. She has her own sort of beauty, which comes to her from evil, always devoid of spirituality, but sometimes tinged with a weariness which imitates true melancholy. Resplendent in her demonic majesty, the prostitute takes center stage in this supernatural spectacle. Just as the virginal heroine is an integral feature of the Sadian Gothic mise-en-scene, and the female revenant is a part of Poe's interior decor, the prostitute and the city assume inextricable Gothic aspects. Woman is, once again, posited as a site or space against the historical subjectivity of the male Gothic agent. Nevertheless, Charles Bernheimer proposes, male artists' relation to the figure of the prostitute in 19th century France was extremely complex, involving both identification and repulsion. As an emblem for their own artistic practice, it represented creative artifice, surface illusion, seductive falsity, even a kind of inspiring void. Rita Felsky similarly describes the social and cultural significance of the prostitute on the mid-19th century French landscape as generating a number of conflicting interpretations, seen by some contemporary writers to exemplify the tyranny of commerce and the universal domination of the cash nexus. It was read by others as representing the dark abyss of a dangerous female sexuality, linked to contamination, disease, and the breakdown of social hierarchies in the modern city. Circulating through the city, the female prostitute is a commodified cultural icon, dressed up in the costume of male desire. Her cosmetics and adornment veil the mortal, rotting, and fading realities of her corporeality, and therefore mitigate her perceived proximity to nature. Woman, suggests Baudelaire, is quite within her rights. Indeed, she is even accomplishing a kind of duty when she devotes herself to appearing magical and supernatural. She has to astonish and charm us. As an idol, she is obliged to adorn herself in order to be adored. Quoting his infamous differentiation between the dandy and woman, Camille Paglia asks why woman inspires such horror for Baudelaire. She proposes that, in the Baudelairean imagination, woman is the dandy's opposite because she lacks spiritual contour and inhabits the procreative realm of fluids where objects dissolve. Baudelaire's proto-decadent creation of a world of glittering art objects is a response to the horror of the female liquid realm. The decadent vamp, as a Medusan figure, represents the dangerous, all-consuming reproductive body, the female body as leaking vessel. The prevalence of the prostitute in French literary and artistic representations can also be attributed to phobias about disease and, specifically, the spread of syphilis throughout the century. Significantly then, the dark abyss is mapped along the axis not only of gender, but also of race. The foreign-born prostitute in particular, notes Elaine Showalter, was positioned as the alleged source of venereal contagion and the scapegoat for male sexual anxieties. Sander L. Gilman, for example, highlights the fusion of iconographies of the sexualized woman and the black woman in canonical works of 19th century art, most notably Edouard Manet's Olympia 1863, where it is the black female as emblem of illness who haunts the background of the painting. Notions of dark female sexuality thus became the site for broader fears about contamination, corruption, and disease. An ambivalent fascination with the treacherous female body underlies Baudelaire's iconographic transformation of the muse in the Black Venus cycle of Les Fleurs du Mal. Baudelaire's vamping of the muse as a figure of corrupt and diseased female corporeality is exemplified by one of the early sonnets of Spleen et Idéal, La Muse Malade, the sick muse. The invocation to the female muse at the beginning of this poem ostensibly reiterates a classical invocation, Ma pauvre muse, hélas, qu'as-tu donc ce matin? However, Baudelaire's sick muse is aligned with the figure of the succubus that threatens to sap the poet's creative vitality and virility. With her yeux creux, she figures the deadly gaze of the Medusa as the mendacious prostitute who jeopardizes his creative project. Although the poet ostensibly questions the muse's sickness, he positions her as the Gothic mirror onto which he projects his anxieties about spiritual degeneration and decomposition. Et je veux tour à tour réfléchir sur ton teint, la folie et l'horreur, froide et taciturne. Transforming the muse's skin into a textural surface, the poet confronts the Medusa's gaze. Nevertheless, while the eloquence of Baudelaire's poetic in the opening two quatrains suggests the extent to which the sick muse provides valuable inspiration for the artistic project, it simultaneously functions to contain the grotesque body of the muse within the classical structures of the sonnet. Although the first two